Hey guys, it's Mo with Mo in the Deep End, where you get headlines, true crimes, and all the absurd. And I thought we would do maybe this longer article about a New Jersey case. It does look like this case is now finally getting ready to go to trial, so it might be one that we can cover, but I know some of you guys like to put on longer videos, so this is a bit of a longer video article. It's going to be about a 26-minute read, but it is something that we can look into and possibly cover this trial. Now, a family's brutal murder shattered an upscale New Jersey town, and 7 years later, will justice be served? So interesting, and it's going to be a long one, so let's buckle in. Chapter 1: A Family Extinguished. The prowling car crept along the long driveway under the cover of darkness. It stealthily rolled toward the white modernist mansion bathed in ghostly light of a full moon. Now, the sprawling residence was the home for a young family of four, a place where they splashed in the pool, snuggled together on the couch, and spoiled their Kelpie sheepdog, Sydney. There, the killer climbed out of the vehicle in the early morning hours of November 20th, 2018. But he didn't enter the house. Not then. He watched as a stocky 5'6" man, strong from regular workouts and groggy from sleep, emerged after the home's power supply suddenly cut out. Keith Caneiro, a 50-year-old husband and father of two, was sleeping inside and had come out to check why the generator didn't kick on. Only the killer knows what happens next. Did Caneiro recognize him, speak to him? Did he turn to call the police after seeing a gleaming 9mm in the killer's hand? The bullets came no matter how he reacted, hitting him in the behind, neck, head, and face. The multimillionaire entrepreneur was on the brink of a promising career change, a family man described as charismatic and warm, like radiant light that drew you in, fell to the grass and blinked out in a moment. Now the gunshots echoed across nearby fields, stables, and tennis courts of the bucolic Colts Neck, an exclusive community of horse farms and sprawling estates for the likes of Bruce Springsteen and members of Bon Jovi. A few miles away, someone reported gunshots at 3:33 a.m., just as the killer was making his way inside the home. What happened next, and the order it happened, was another secret known only to him, but one by one, each remaining Caneiro family member was brutally extinguished. These four people just disappeared, said J.P. Bartolomeo, Colton ex-mayor, in 2018. They were just erased. Nearly 7 years have passed since the execution of the entire Caneiro family and the arrest of Paul Caneiro, Keith's brother and business partner, in one of the most brutal cases I have ever seen, according to Monmouth County Prosecutor Christopher I will get this right, Gremincioni, possibly. Give me grace, y'all. Now, Keith, Jennifer, 45, Jesse, 11, and Sophia, 8, each soul was snuffed out just before Thanksgiving 2018 at the hand of someone who knew the children from the day they were born, according to police. Now, Paul Caneiro awaits trial next month after years of delays in the horrific murder case that has garnered headlines around the globe. Now, prosecutors contend that he took the lives of his brother's family and set their, mansion ablaze after Keith cut him off financially. Now, Paul, who had been stealing from his brother, then allegedly tried to deflect suspicion by lighting his own house on fire, according to authorities. Now, he has proclaimed his innocence despite a mountain of evidence seized from his home, including a knife, rubber gloves, blood-stained clothing, and items covered in DNA. The prosecution says that connects him to the murders of his niece and nephew. So if they have this, just Lord Chippy awaits, sir. It felt like something you would only ever see on TV, said Brian Bott, who befriended Keith after he started training at Bott's gym, Aspire Fitness. It wasn't like the two of them had a fight and it got out of hand and this terrible thing happened. It was obviously extremely thought out and orchestrated. Jennifer had dark hair and a brilliant smile. She was a mom who valued her loved ones above all else. Now, the killer felled her on the stairs between the first floor and the basement, stabbing her 5 times in the torso and, shooting her in the face. Now, authorities needed dental records to positively identify her body because allegedly after he left, he set the house on fire. So all of the victims who were left in the house were burned fairly severely. This is just an awful case. I do now remember I've heard about this case and I do want to cover this trial. Now, Jesse was a young history buff who had just turned 11. In the kitchen, he was up against a man more than twice his weight and a full foot taller than him, authorities allege. Now, he was stabbed 7 times. Sophia, the youngest, not even 50 pounds, suffered at least 30 knife wounds straight to the center of the mother effing sun, and was left on the landing of the stairs to the second floor. She passed away both from, as you would probably logically guess, the stab wounds, but also smoke inhalation. So she was left there to suffer. Sir, there is not a place low enough in Hades, if they convict you, that I would struggle sending you, if you understand my drift, allegedly in Minecraft. Quote, to stab a child 30-some times, that speaks of a deep-seated rage that you would probably see in an intimate killing, said Charles P. Ewing, a forensic psychologist who wrote a book on the different types of familicides, so murders that take place within a family. Now, as Paul sat in a jail cell awaiting his long-delayed trial, the Caneiros and their in-laws, the Carrids, waged a bitter, years-long battle over Keith and Jennifer's $1 million estate, missing pieces of a $348,000 jewelry collection, and even over the order in which their loved ones perished and how. The judge presiding over the hearings admonished both sides in disgust. And now finally comes the reckoning for Paul, 58, a brother and uncle accused of cold-blooded murder. The motive, according to prosecutors, he was the next beneficiary on his brother's life insurance policy, but only if Jennifer and the children also passed as well. There is no confession in this case. No one has heard Mr. Caneiro's story, said public defender Monica Milestone at a recent hearing. Now, she and Andy Murray, Paul's other lawyer, would not answer specific questions from NJ Advanced Media, but said in a statement that their client asserts his innocence, which he has maintained steadfastly for 7 years. The Monmouth County Prosecutor's Office would not grant an interview or answer specific questions, citing the upcoming trial. Now, relatives of the Caneiros and their attorneys also declined to comment or didn't return requests for comments or interviews. A quiet hilltop is all that remains of the family home. It was reduced to a boarded-up relic before it was demolished a few years ago. On a visit this spring, a for sale sign swung in the breeze. The fruit trees that Keith carefully cultivated have grown a bit wild, and a few shipping containers sat at the end of the driveway, but otherwise the property is deserted. Now, Chapter 2, a second crime scene. Paul Caneiro's face glowed red, lit by strobe lights of fire trucks and police cruisers in the pre-dawn cold. As the fire smoldered at Colt's Neck's mansion, a dozen miles away, he stood in the street outside his tasteful Ocean Township home. A roaring fire climbed up the back of his house right next to the gas meter, one police officer observed with a note of panic in his voice, and into the attic, body cam shows. Now, inside his Porsche Cayenne, Paul's wife and 2 daughters, 26 and 23, and their 2 dogs were keeping warm. The 5'11", 230-pound man looked like a concerned father who had just been woken from a dead sleep to a shocking house fire. He was barefoot, wearing only shorts and a long-sleeved shirt. A neighbor noted that Paul was obviously upset as the fire burned. His blue eyes were wet with tears. But the clues at the scene suggested that this was an arson, not an accident. Now, officers stumbled on a tiny fire at the base of an open garage door on the opposite side of the house from the raging inferno, and blasted it with a fire extinguisher. There's no reason for that to be there, one officer observed. The smell of gasoline was impossible to miss. Only a few feet away, a red gas can with a melted spout sat next to a charred rubber glove. A hood of a Porsche Macan parked just outside was marred with brown scorch marks, as if someone had thrown gas on it and lit it. "We got a whodunit," a supervisor said. Ocean Township officer Brennan Bernhard approached the Caneiro family and asked Paul, standing outside the SUV, where they could find a hard drive for his security cameras. He replied back, glancing back at his family, and one of his daughters answered for him. It was in the garage. When the officer asked if the system had been on, he offered a strange response. "I've been having problems with stuff in the garage," he said. Now, Paul later got more specific, saying he shut off the system periodically because it was slowing the Wi-Fi, prosecutors wrote in court documents. Now, police would discover that neither claim was true. The cameras had been recording just fine at 1:29 a.m. The final footage showed a shirtless Paul strolling directly toward the security system and turning it off. Well, that's one way it would have trouble, I guess. Now, the next potential clue was passed around by officers like a game of telephone as crime scene tape was going up that morning. Paul's hand was injured. Now, he hadn't tried to hide it. He told an officer he had hurt his hand somehow and offered it for inspection. Now, authorities would later describe his left hand as swollen with a small circular cut or abrasion in the middle of the swollen area. Now, he'd later tell them that he hurt his hand opening the front door, but he told his wife that he'd heard it coming down the stairs. It wasn't long before a German Shepherd with a keen nose was circling the perimeter of the home and patting his way inside. Canine Titan alerted his handler to the presence of gasoline at a basement window where the blaze had spread up the back of the house, as well as in the garage and in the trunk of the scorched Porsche Macan. Look, I'm probably not saying that right. I'm not a carologist, but I'm sure a Porsche sounds super fancy, so there you go. It was Police believed that they had enough to charge Paul with arson, but in the coming days, the discoveries were made connecting him to something abominable, authorities contend. Discoveries like a bag in his Porsche Cayenne containing the barrel of a gun, a night vision attachment, and parts that could be used to suppress the sound of, shots being fired. Like a plastic tub in the home's basement where state police K9 found blood-stained jeans and a single bloody latex glove just feet from where the fires had started. Now, DNA from these bloodstains and a knife in the home matched Sophia, and advanced analysis later connected a bloodstain to Jesse, according to authorities. The inside folds of the bloody jeans, a crime lab expert found an unspent bullet, a Fiocchi 9mm round with the head stamp GFL 10-9 by 19. It not only matched a pile of bullets found in a stockpile of registered, force multipliers and ammunition in Paul's basement, but it also matched to the spent casings found scattered around his brother. Now, again, we all know that ballistics information is a bit hit or miss. There was also an odd thing that Paul's daughters mentioned to the police in their interviews the morning of the fire. They had been informed of the deaths of their aunt, uncle, and little cousins, something their father had said as they all sat in the police station, according to a prosecution document. Now, Uncle Keith had texted him at 3 a.m. saying his power was out and the generator had not turned on. Paul hadn't responded. He told his daughters because he was in bed fast asleep. Now, authorities would come to believe that the person who took Keith's life cut the power to the Colt's Neck home as well. Now, a security camera in Keith's garage captured a figure near the generator and electrical panel before footage along with the electricity was shut off at 2:50 a.m. It was part of a plan, a police source told NJ Advanced Media, to lure the unsuspecting father into the night and into the range of a waiting, red rummer. Chapter 3, Building a Family. Joseph DeAlgrio got a job right out of college at CompuMicro, a small store selling new technology in 1987, personal computers in Staten Island, where he met a smiling young man working up front who chatted easily with customers. The man knew what he was talking about even though he was just out of high school. He was gifted with that stuff, D'Algrio said. I mean, he was good. He was friendly and funny and always happy and willing to help out. Now, Keith Caneiro didn't have a degree, but when he left the store to do computer work for Citibank, but D'Algro wasn't surprised to see the young man excel in the booming tech industry. Smart, bright, ambitious, all those things, he was a go-getter, he said. Now, details are scarce about Keith's youth, but he spent his childhood in Brooklyn before his family moved to Staten Island. By the early 90s, he had started his own business, Square One, doing tech consulting and installing networks, according to a 2001 profile in Ashby Park Press. Now, his first employee was his older brother, Paul, the press profile reported. While Keith was the CEO and majority owner, the brother had a 10% stake. Their father, Caesar, and youngest brother, Corey, also worked there at times. Now, looking to expand their portfolio, Keith and Paul bought a pest control company, EcoStar, in 2011. Now, by then, Keith was a family man. He had met Jennifer Carditis. Look, I will research these names. And it seemed meant to be. They even shared the same birthday 5 years apart. Both had fathers who had immigrated to the U.S., Jennifer's from Greece and Keith's from Spain. They bought their 10-acre property in Colts Neck in 1999 and married the next year. In a court filing, Jennifer's sister wrote that Keith fit easily into their family. Friends stated that the couple shared the same magnetism, charm, and radiated happiness and good vibes. Jennifer was bright, empathetic, and vibrant, her obituary said. She loved to go to live dancing, music, play blackjack, and cook her father's Greek recipes. The couple welcomed Jesse first in 2007 and Sophia in 2010. Jesse was a fifth grader who loved Legos and Fortnite and would talk about current affairs with any adults, his obituary said. Debbie Tarby, a music teacher who has since retired from Colts Neck schools, said he was loved by classmates, rather quiet, and clearly proud of his Greek heritage. Facebook shows, photos of Jesse mugging for the camera starting when he was barely more than a toddler. He had brown hair and eyes and a smile that revealed a tiny gap between his front teeth. With Sophia, it was her kindness that stood out, according to Tarby. The little girl was always surrounded by friends. Sophia was very spunky, exuberant, just a charming little girl, Tarby said, fighting back tears. Sophia was also fearless and up for any adventure as long as she could take all her stuffed animals along to any sleepover, her cousin wrote in an online tribute. She had her father's nose and her mother's wide smile. Her long, light brown hair would fall across her face. It was no different on a winter day in 2016 when the then 6-year-old girl joined her father at the gym for his workout. Now, Sophia climbed on Keith's back to make his push-ups much harder. Bot, the gym owner, started a recording and called out to the little girl, who was wearing a fuchsia skirt, gray leggings, and white sneakers, "Sophia, count the reps." And she mischievously proclaimed her dad did only one push-up before pushing her hair out of her face to reveal a Cheshire Cat grin. But then Keith was already one of the gym's most popular member. He tended to fill the room with his presence, Bot said. The gym once held a kickoff meeting for an 8-week weight loss challenge Keith had surprise planned. He showed up at the meeting with like 4 boxes of Dindo's pizza and fed everyone, Bot said. I wasn't happy about it at the time, but it was funny afterward. Despite his success, ambition still tugged at Keith, and he went back to school to Columbia University, finishing 2 degrees by 2018. By then, Square One was finishing a contract with one final client, and Keith was actively trying to sell EcoStar. Now, just 2 days before his death, Keith emailed a classmate about job opportunities in IT, saying he was ready to move on and try something new, according to court filings. But sadly, he would never get the chance. Chapter 4, The Downward Spiral. While Keith Caneiro's horizons kept expanding, the world was closing in on his older brother. The reasons remain shrouded in mystery. Paul Caneiro was hurt in a car crash in 2012, suffering injuries to his hip and back. He was never the same. Jennifer Caneiro's father, Valisis Cardetis, and sister Bonnie wrote in a 2019 lawsuit. He underwent several surgeries in the ensuing years, and his personality and demeanor increasingly soured. Keith, Jennifer, and Bonnie wondered if Paul had developed a dependence on any sort of medications, their suit said. Now, he was also having an affair and spending money he didn't have on his lover's Audi and other expenses, prosecutors revealed in court. When police interviewed his wife Susan hours after the fire in their home, she revealed that they had been sleeping in separate rooms due to marital difficulties, and he'd spent about 6 months living elsewhere before recently moving back in. Now, Bonnie characterized some of Paul's. Now, Bonnie is Jennifer, so the woman who was in the family that all passed, her sister, characterized some of Paul's behavior as erratic. But Keith used stronger language in a text to a friend in the summer of 2018, just months before his death, stating, "He's a bit effing nuts." He was, in fact, eager to be rid of his brother. The sale of the business was winding down, operations at square one, which might have caused problems for Paul. While he would benefit from the sale, it would mean the end of a regular salary, $225,000, which had been paid to Susan Caneiro because Paul was collecting disability due to his injury. So, yeah, that's kind of fraudulent. Probably going to get you in trouble. As a result, Paul also was charged with insurance fraud, although no charges were filed against his wife. But Paul's money woes ran deep. Despite his hefty income, he was in debt, owing back taxes, and had taken out multiple mortgages, according to court documents. He was also appropriating at least $11,000 a month in business funds and running up debt on a company credit card that Keith had to pay off, according to lawsuits and probate filings from, Jennifer's family. Now, Paul also took money from Keith's trust fund and deposited it into his own accounts starting in 2017. Now, the total would reach more than $78,000, according to authorities. That money was earmarked for premiums on a $3 million life insurance policy Keith had created nearly 20 years earlier to benefit his wife and children. Paul, the trustee and contingent beneficiary, forged documents to keep this, hidden. But things started to crumble because you can't keep, hidden the massive amount of debt, all of that money. You can't keep it hidden. I mean, math eventually wins. For those of us who hate math, math eventually wins, especially with money. Now, Jennifer Caneiro confided to her sister that Paul had been diverting money from their trust, Bonnie claimed in a lawsuit. Paul managed to accidentally put $25,000 toward student loans instead of our trust last year alone, Jennifer texted her sister on April 11th, 2018, according to a lawsuit. He's basically stealing from us. At the same time, he failed to pay for his own daughter's tuition, which Keith ended up covering to the tune of $60,000, she said. Now, Keith confronted Paul about the missed payments in a series of text messages in the spring of 2018. Now, Paul said he accidentally selected the wrong payee, as you do. Keith made it clear he wanted to end their financial entanglements, sell EcoStar, and cash out his trust account to pay off other debts. Paul could see the writing on the wall. The prosecution said his income would dry up. Keith hired an accountant to do a forensic analysis of the accounts, he said in text messages to a friend, and he planned to give Bonnie control of the trust. In fact, Keith had reached out to his estate attorney, Kimberly Payton, a year earlier, seeking to remove Paul as the trustee of his trust and contingent executor of his will. He had planned to replace him with Jennifer's sister, something that he had told Paul about that spring. But while his will could be changed, the trust was irrevocable, Patton explained in an email exchange that was included in other documents, meaning that Paul would have to voluntarily resign, which would pass control to the next trustee, their brother Corey Caneiro, Patton said. However, there were no further emails from Keith directing changes, according to court filings. Now, Bonnie swore her sister and brother-in-law told her that they intended to make her the executor of their wills, a contingent beneficiary of Jennifer's will, and a trustee of the insurance trust and guardian of their children if both of them should pass away, and their kids need to be taken care of. But there is no evidence that any of those steps were officially taken. Now, as the fall wore on, Keith seemed to have run out of patience with Paul. 3 days before, the murders, he told his father-in-law that Paul had stolen $90,000 from Jess and Sophia's college funds, and he was going to cut off Paul's salary, the lawsuit said. Now, on the evening of November 19th, just hours before his death, Keith was again on the phone with his brother, and the call was captured on the home surveillance system and played in court. "Tell me where the money went, Paul." While Paul's response isn't audible, Keith later told their brother Corey that Paul had been crying, claiming he was in bed with a migraine, Monica Milestone, Paul's attorney, said in court. Keith gave Paul a hard deadline. He had until 8 p.m. to provide the trust login information so he could see how much money was missing. That night, Keith forwarded Corey an email that he had sent to his employees announcing the discontinuation of all compensation to Paul because of the missing money. This whole house of cards he had set up was going to come crashing down, Assistant Prosecutor Nicole Vance said in a court hearing. Now, that day, Paul arrived home around 3 p.m. saying he was feeling poorly after doing a stress test. Susan Caneiro told the police he went upstairs to his bedroom and stayed there all evening, according to her. Paul told the police that he left the room twice overnight to take medication and work on his computer. But prosecutors contend that he did not stay home all night. While his home security feed was disabled, a neighbor's camera captured headlights leaving his house shortly after 2 a.m. Yeah, you can disconnect your security system. You can't disconnect, Mrs. Kravitz's next door. Chapter 5, Mudslinging. Now, bitter accusations began to fly when the extended Caneiro Carditis family, with the murders. It just did. The estate was eventually mired in so much litigation and challenges that 3 court-appointed lawyers have billed close to $500,000 working on the case. Yikes. Paul Norris, an estate attorney at the law firm of Stark and Stark, said he has never seen an estate administration drag on for 6+ years that the Caneiro case has. In a situation like this, the interplay between the Slayer statute, the probate law, and then you have LLCs, where there are ownership interests, and it becomes an extremely tangled web, which the court has been tasked with trying to untangle. The actions of the Caneiros, Keith Caneiro's parents, Caesar and Sherry Caneiro, and their youngest son, Corey, and his wife, Alyssa Bertoli, can be viewed as good faith efforts to take care of things after their loved one's shocking death. But in a lawsuit and sworn statement filed in probate court, Bonnie and her parents, Velasquez and Betty Carditis, claimed that the Caneiros were taking the dead couple's possession and rushing out their in-laws from the trust, businesses, and estates. And they weren't just fighting over money, they were fighting also emotional volleys like claims from the Carditis family that they were denied even a simple sentimental keepsake, such as a pair of, sunglasses that Bet Carditis had given her late daughter. At times, Judge Linda Grasso Jones couldn't hide her disbeliefs at the lengths the in-laws were willing to go in a fight no one could win and everyone would lose in. Arguments over who inherited from whom would mean litigating the order of their loved one's death, something that could escalate to exhumation of bodies, warned Grasso Jones, the judge, completely unaware that they had all been cremated. "But if you all want to put these families through this, then so be it," she told the attorneys at a 2020 hearing. Grasso Jones appointed independent executors for both estates and had a court-appointed receiver for the companies. Both families have since received proceeds from the estates based on several agreements hashed out in mediation and negotiations over the year after the judge admonished them to work it out. But resolutions came only after excuse me. The Carditis family claims that the Caneiros helped themselves to the late couple's possessions, including luxury cars that belonged to the estate, a number of Jennifer's most valuable pieces of jewelry, a collection insured for over $350,000, Bonnie claimed. Even after many pieces were found at the prosecutor's office, the Carditis family subpoenaed their in-laws to see what, if any, items they had taken. In court filings, the Caneros didn't deny driving the vehicles or taking items from the home. They believed, both were in the charge of Caesar Caneiro based on the wills, and they would later accuse their in-laws of baseless innuendo and mudslinging. Now, Bonnie's assertion that the Caneros wanted to manage their estates continued long after Corey Caneiro had taken control of the trust. With the money, Corey bought a new $1.8 million home in Fairhaven, according to the lawsuit. Now, Bonnie claims that Corey told her in a text, Paul may have drained the trust, but instead the Caneiro family helped Paul renounce his trusteeship via his wife, who had power of attorney just a few days after the murder, ensuring that it would pass to Corey, Bonnie claimed in court. This avoided having the court rule on the Slayer statute, which would have removed Paul as an executor, beneficiary, and trustee. Now, this case is ongoing despite most checks being cut years ago. But even the sale of the vacant Colts Neck property dragged on until last year, after a deal for Corey to buy it ended with the two sides duking it out in court, as the judge put it. It was finally purchased for $650,000 in January 2024 by the boss of a Hudson County logistics company who declined to comment. I mean, it was just property. Now, the property was briefly listed earlier this year for more than 2.5 times that price. The listing said there was enough space for a 20,000 square foot home, flanked by multi-million dollar homes and equestrian farms. Now, that listing has since been taken off the market, so who knows? Now, chapter 6, and the trial that we need to hopefully will be, streamed and we can look at. Chapter 6, Justice? Question mark. Complicated murder cases often take years to go to trial, but the Caneiro case has seen trial dates set and postponed numerous times as attorneys argue over the admissibility of certain evidence. Debates have included much wrangling over last fall over a new type of DNA analysis of mixed samples. Now, the analysis of Paul's bloodstained genes found a strong likelihood that the DNA belonged to both Sophia and Jesse. The judge ruled prosecutors can present it to the jury, a decision that the defense has appealed. Now, this summer, Judge Mark C. Lennox also struck a blow to the prosecution's case. He determined that jurors could not see the surveillance video that showed Paul approaching his own security system moments before it shut off early on the morning of the killings because police did not have a warrant to seize it. Now, Paul continues to maintain his innocence, including handwritten missives to the court. Since the murders, Jennifer Caneiro's father has died. Paul's wife, Susan, sold the family home and bought elsewhere just in her name. Her daughters have had to grapple with the reality that their jail father is accused of robbing them and of their most adored relatives. And back in Colt's Neck, the haunting echoes of the murders linger. A teacher still chokes up, recalling Sophia's bubbly energy, or how Jesse would light up when he talked about family vacations to his grandpa's hometown in Aegina, Greece. Did you leave his work up on the board or take it down? Tarby said of Jesse, her student of 3 years. In my class, he had a recorder. What happened to that? A former mayor sees a community that continues to grieve. There was an outpouring of support that people that just wanted to give, but there was no one to give it to, said Bartolomeo, whose son was a friend of Jesse's. And the images of the grisly murder scene remain with Dr. Boris Volstin. His yard lines up with the Caneiro home, and the plastic surgeon didn't know them well, but his daughter and Sophia were friends, and, he would bring her over to play with the Caneiros, have, on their playground, have sleepovers, things like that. On that faithful morning, Volstin had just come home for a meeting when his wife called him. The smoke was billowing from the Caneiro's yard, and she couldn't get Keith or Jennifer on the phone. So he circled back and pulled into the driveway, wondering if they were burning leaves. I opened the side door, and it was like a thick clouds of smoke. I mean, I couldn't see my hand, and I couldn't breathe. He talked to a 911 dispatcher as he climbed on the steps of his SUV to get back in the vehicle. As I was turning around, I glanced out of the corner of my eye and saw a shadow in the bushes close to the house. I realized that was a body there. He was composed when talking about the tragedy, but when asked the question, how do you tell your daughter what happened to her friend? He fell silent for a few moments. I didn't for a while, he said somberly. Eventually I did. It would be hard enough to explain to a child that their friend had passed from an illness or a car accident. But this is something different. And that's where that story ends. So I will be publishing this probably at the end of the weekend after I do a little bit more digging and see if this is a case that will be streamed. But this is definitely a crazy one, and it has that kind of cold case element to it. A lot of evidence and just an all around tragedy, and hopefully they've got enough to put this man away forever if they can prove what he did, which I think DNA kind of, and him like shirtless turning off his, security camera and stealing money from every which way. I'm guessing he's super sus, but he is presumed innocent until, tried in a court of law. So hopefully we can get to this trial. Have a lovely day. Thank you for sharing your time with me. Please do all of the YouTube-y stuff, and I will see you guys in a little bit. Bye.